The fallout continues tonight after the Army charges Bo Bergdahl with desertion and misbehavior before the enemy. The White House still stands by their deal, saying trading 5 Taliban commanders for an alleged deserter was a good one. With me now, retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. All right, good evening, Colonel. When did we know that Bergdahl was a deserter?
He was initially set as a deserter based on a report done in 2009 by Naval Criminal Investigative Service. And, Judge, something happened within the context of that. Right in 2010, right after the report was done and submitted, he was changed back to essentially status unknown. But it was very clear that there was a credible report done by credible military investigators in 2009 that he had deserted his post. And that investigation was validated by a second investigation run by General Dahl.
Okay, so initially what we've got is he's designated a deserter. Then all of a sudden they attach some other phrase and they take down the claim that he's a deserter. And what is the phrase that they substituted for that?
Essentially, status unknown is the military equivalent of it. It's just basically we don't know what his status is, and there's really not a status that's like that within the military talk. The status they selected doesn't even exist.
All right, so it sounds to me, and it may just be the prosecutor and me, that there's a narrative going on here that the Pentagon says, oh, he can't be a deserter. Take that down, and let's just put up something else that we can never, refer to because it's not in the military code of justice. But Colonel, I want to ask you this.
Sure.
Enemy combatants are not not prisoners of war, right?
They are equivalent. They've been treated as if they're prisoners of war under the rules of Geneva Convention. So while they're not, essentially they could be killed as non-combatants because they do not fit within the law of land warfare. In this case, we have chosen to treat them like prisoners of war.
Okay, so they can be held until the termination of hostilities.
That's correct.
And,
absolutely.
So the president didn't have to let those 5 go. And now we find out this week that 3 of the 5 want to get back to old business, killing Americans and anybody else that they hate. Now, if a condition of this prisoner swap, that the one Bergdahl deserter for the 5 Taliban commanders, if there was a violation of the conditions that Qatar was supposed to monitor, shouldn't we demand a return of those at least 3 who violated the conditions from Qatar?
Judge, 2 of those are wanted by the World Court. They should just be turned over to the World Court, period. But with that said, yes, the 3 who have violated the terms of their, I would call, parole, they should immediately be terminated, their freedom be revoked, and move back to Guantanamo. That is the right thing to do, especially by the fact, Judge, President Obama announced just days ago that we're extending our combat time in Afghanistan, which means we have a war there, people are shooting, people are dying, and we are still in contact with the enemy, the very enemy he's about to release back to the battlefield.
And what about the fact that we decided that Bo Bergdahl was worth trading these 5? And are there other prisoners around the world or in that area that we could have traded for?
Well, it's more like there were other options which were equally viable and probably more likely to have less political consequences which were available to the president. Let me be very clear on this. There's a congressional investigation. I'm told by the folks running it that they are getting no cooperation by the White House. And more importantly, in December of 2013, I was briefed, and I can't go into all the details because it was partly a classified briefing, that the president selected the return option. And I spoke very vehemently at the time. It was a mistake. And no one seemed to listen, and it was one of those things where the president decided to do something which I think you've alluded to. I think it was a political decision based on trying to clear people out of Guantanamo Bay, rather than trying to do what was best for the nation. Bo Bergdahl was not worth the trade of 5-star generals of the adversary back to the enemy.
But what the president said was, he said, we tried to get him and he moved, or our intelligence wasn't good. He's always blaming the intelligence community. But are there other ways we might have gotten Bergdahl back without sending these 5 Taliban commanders?
Yes. Absolutely. We first talked about this last May. There were 3 other viable options, one of which I was actually asked to provide advice to, and I can't say much more than that at this point in time. But it was very clear that these other options would not have required any Taliban to be returned. I think Bergdahl would have ended up back here probably under the radar without all the drama which the president brought on it. And I think it would have been a better outcome for all because, frankly, Judge, at this point, I think Bergdahl's become a pawn in a much larger game. and I think the consequences are going to be more severe for him in this option rather than another option the president could have picked to bring him back.
Quickly before we go,
sure.
The New York Times says that there's no need to prosecute Sergeant Bo Bergdahl. What do you think of that? I mean, I'm stunned. It's like saying, you know what, if somebody gets shot robbing a bank, no sense prosecuting him because he's suffered enough.
This is the most fundamental requirement of a soldier. When you're in combat, you do your duty. People died. People have been killed by General Washington for deserting their post. This goes back to the beginning of the Continental Army. This is the most sacred requirement of your duty. You do not shirk your duty. And Judge, what's worse there, Article 99, the mischief before the enemy, that means there's information that indicates he cooperated with the enemy, which makes it even worse. That could get him a life sentence. This is no light matter, period.
All right, Colonel Tony Shaffer, thanks so much for being with us this evening.
Thank you.
All right, and joining me now, retired